Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. Well, I want to hop right in and cover as much as I possibly can about Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. We left off yesterday in the Gospel of John, chapter 19, and I was reading out of verses 31 through 37. And what's really neat about that is John records that there's 2 Sabbaths that year during the Passover. By him putting that in his account of Jesus' death and burial and resurrection, we can go back in history and designate what year Jesus would have died. And they've narrowed it down to either 29 AD or 33 AD. If you read all of the 4 Gospels side by side and study those out, guys, you can spend 6 months easy just studying that period of time, that 1 week, the Passion Week, of where Jesus is arrested, beaten, hung on the cross, buried, and resurrected. So I'm just going to pick up where I left off yesterday in the Gospel of John, chapter 19, and I want to go 38 through 42, and then I want to double back and explain some things to you and just help you understand what Scripture's really saying. So here we go. And later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate if he could take the body of Jesus. Joseph was a secret follower, a disciple of Jesus, because he was afraid of some of the Jewish leaders. Pilate gave his permission, so Joseph came and took Jesus' body away. Nicodemus, who earlier had come to Jesus at night, went with Joseph. He bought about 100 pounds of myrrh and aloe. These 2 men took Jesus' body, wrapped it with the spices in the linen cloth, which is how they would bury the dead. In the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden was a new tomb that had never been used before. And the men laid Jesus in that tomb because it was nearby, and they were preparing to start their Sabbath day. This was the Jewish day of preparation. Okay, let me go back and start giving you some information here. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus were very, very wealthy men. They were prominent leaders. They were part of the Sanhedrin, the council of 72 men, Jewish men who were rulers over the Jewish people. This to us would be like a governor in a state here in the United States. That would be the level of their political power. These men were very well respected and very rich. The amount of money they spent on the spices for Jesus, in money-wise, just for Jesus for that day, was about $2,500 to $2,600 worth of spices. It says 100 pounds. This is what they would bury a deity, a king, with. Usually 1 pound is all that was used for a body. So Jesus had 100 times more spices than a normal person would have been buried with. This was truly, these 2 men were saying out loud that Jesus truly was the King of the Jews, that he is King of Kings. They believed in him. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit, and I'm going to give you a reference on the pounds of spices. Over in Acts 5, verse 34, and then in Acts 22:3, we see the name of a Jewish rabbi. His name is Gamaliel. Gamaliel is one of the most well-respected Jewish teachers of all time in Jewish history. They have recorded that when Gamaliel passed away, they buried him with 40 pounds of spices. And here we see these 2 rich men buy 100 pounds of spices for Jesus. Now, Gamaliel, I want to say this, in Acts 22:3, Paul mentions that he sat under and learned about Scripture and Jewish laws under this leader, Gamaliel, who was buried with those 40 pounds of spices. So what they did is they took Jesus' body and off the cross, and they put a face handkerchief over the face of a dead man. And they would lay Jesus in, it's called a shroud, and the size of it is 3'7" wide by 14.5 feet long. So they would lay the man in half of it, lay his body in there, and they would take the spices and put them around the man and maybe under his arms and stuff, but they would just sprinkle it, and then they would take the other half and cover him up. And that's how Jesus, and then they would take the edges and fold the edges up, and that's how they would have laid Jesus in his tomb. And also, I would like to say this. You know, when they wrapped Jesus up, they were in a hurry because they had to get him down off the cross in the tomb and the spices on him before sunset at 6 p.m. The next thing I want to talk to you about, which is outside of Scripture, but I think it's kind of cool. I want to bring up again this little book that I have read, and it's called the Archco Volumes. It's free. It's out there on the internet, and you can download it and read it at no charge. But this is where I get some of my outside of the Bible information. They're very, very ancient writings. Let me tell you what's in here. This Gamaliel that I was talking about today, they have an interview, him interviewing Joseph and Mary about Jesus, which is really cool to read. Then there's a report of Caiaphas to the Sanhedrin concerning the execution of Jesus. Now, Caiaphas was the high priest that saw Jesus illegally at night, and he's the one that really pushed to get Jesus crucified. Then we have another report of Caiaphas to the Sanhedrin, watch this, concerning the resurrection of Jesus. This letter that he wrote to the Sanhedrin, he's actually saying that he has seen the resurrected Jesus and that Jesus is alive, and he resigns and is no longer part of the Sanhedrin. That's a really cool letter to read. And then we have in here in the Archco volume is Pilate's report to Caesar about the arrest, trial, and crucifixion of Jesus. Then we have Herod, his defense to the Roman Senate regarding his conduct of killing the babies in Bethlehem. And we have Herod, him defending himself before the Roman Senate, executing John the Baptist and beheading him. And then we have a letter from Hillel regarding God's providence over the Jews. But anyway, that's just the last one in there. But this little book is so interesting because it's really very, very interesting that Caiaphas claims, and this isn't the only writing that says this, he claims that Jesus came to him after he was resurrected and he became a believer. And what's real interesting also is the letter that Pilate did here in the Archco volume. He insinuates and says in the letter that he knows that Jesus was actually resurrected. But in here they record that the Romans told Pilate to commit suicide and kill himself, and Pilate actually really did do that. That is in history for sure. Pilate did commit suicide. So anyway, I want to say this before I close. This is a cool little book to read, and some of the letters are really, really cool to read out and get the information out of. I do not give them the same level as I do the Bible. If it's something in there that doesn't line up with the Bible, then I just let it go, okay, guys? But listen, I'm going to cut you loose, and I'll see you again right here on Facebook. Bye-bye.